partnerships and collaboration. We really are truly seeking to partner, not do all of this on our own or try to do this on our own or recreate the wheel. And I hope we'll give you a few examples in a few moments that illustrate that commitment. I also want to point to just a couple of these pillars, and I'm going to give like one example from each, but of the evolution I want you to know about. So Autism Speaks in the beginning was all about raising awareness of autism, simple awareness. And we've moved on from that to now promoting understanding and acceptance, much more active words and much more honestly geared towards places like the workplace, right? So, okay, great, we're all aware of the rising prevalence of the challenges of some people with autism. What are we doing about it? How are we welcoming them into our workplaces, into our homes, into our communities? A couple of these haven't changed. We continue to be a catalyst for life-changing research breakthroughs. I'll give you a couple of examples of that work. That work continues, but maybe with a little bit of a different focus. We're increasing early childhood screenings and interventions. That is also something that has not changed, trying to lower that age of diagnosis, in particular of children of minority backgrounds who continue to be diagnosed too late. A pillar of our mission that's really important here that wasn't always the case is improving the transition to adulthood. And that's where a lot of my work and Josh's work is focused, and what we're going to spend most of our time there. And lastly, we are, for a lot of folks, an information and referral source for local resources that can help their families on a daily basis. So a little bit of that kind of awareness into action, acceptance and understanding. We continue to be a big part of World Autism Month and World Autism Awareness Day as designated by the United Nations. We've been part of that designation since its beginning and partnering with different countries and organizations around the world to really bring a kinder, more understanding world for people with autism and other disabilities. We have a lot of different ways people can engage with us. I wanted to share this screen because we're sort of figuring out how we're going to do some of these things during COVID. So there's this pretty cool kindness campaign this year that started before COVID. And we've seen some pretty creative, innovative ways people are, committing acts of kindness for those who they love, for their communities, for schools, for frontline, health workers, whatever it might be, and sharing this. So we had a goal of reaching 1 million acts of kindness, and it's a pretty cool campaign that's thriving, during COVID. Our work on research and investment in science and in these breakthroughs is significant, and it continues to be. We are continuing to lead on genomic discoveries about the basic biology of autism. That's not a typo. We know now that there are many, many subtypes of autism, and we believe that we can much better target individualized treatments if we continue to learn more about these kind of different genomic subtypes of autism. Lots of other work there as well. There's a group called the Autism Treatment Network that's changing into what they're calling an Autism Learning Health Network. It's a network of these 12 medical centers, often connected to universities, kind of doing the cutting edge program development, clinical care that we can learn from and export to other providers. As I said, we continue to work to lower the age of diagnosis, in particular for children of color, and providing screeners, risk assessments that they can fill out directly on their phone on our website, or connect them to screeners online and then plug them into their pediatricians. So all that being said, there's a ton of more work that if you're interested in any of that, the one piece that I haven't mentioned that I neglected to is a major focus for us too is advocacy. So policy, both in Washington, D.C., but also in the state houses across the country. And that's something Josh has actually long been involved with at Autism Speaks before his employment here. So if that's something that interests you, I'm sure he'd be happy to share more about that work. But I did want to get into this, employment and why we're really here talking to you all today. And I apologize if some of this is totally old hat to all of you. I just want to level set and make sure we're all on the same page that basically we know the stats on the outcomes for adults with autism in the US aren't that reliable, but overall, we're pretty confident saying the outcomes are terrible. We're seeing very high unemployment and underemployment rates, not just here where the data is a bit hard to get, but in Asia, in European countries, et cetera, this is a worldwide global problem of unemployment and underemployment. That employment below the capability of someone with autism who has intellectual capability, but has as hallmarks of his disability, deficits in communication and social interaction, right? So these are the barriers. The traditional interview is a huge barrier because it weighs so heavily on those skills. Those are the manifestations of this person's disability. We can't continue to assess people in the same way. So we know that they're faring worse than people with other disabilities, including intellectual disabilities. We also know that our population continues to grow. The estimates of autism prevalence continues to go up. And we know that a recent estimate, 2.2% of the population of adults in this country are on the spectrum already. They're already working alongside us and need our help. But we know that we have between 70 to 100,000 teenagers aging out of the school system each year. And we're nowhere close to serving and scaling up to serve this population. So we focus on the strengths when we talk about employment, as I'm sure you all do. We don't talk about those challenges necessarily, those deficits of autism, at least not right away. We want to lead with strength. And of course, we can't brush with paint with such a broad brush here and say that everyone with autism are good at all of these things. Of course, that's not true. But these are the kind of common buckets that we're seeing. And this was created by an autistic woman at University of Leeds, kind of using her research on what were the common areas of strength. And we see a lot of these, I think, illustrate why we see so much early success in fields like software testing and programming. So it's very much visual acuity is important, accuracy, attention to detail, right? Deep focus and concentration, where my performance would fall off. An autistic person typically tends to get better and better and better as they go through that kind of work. Now, that being said, we're really concerned actually that all of the attention is going to IT, to programming, and also to high finance, so some financial technology work. Josh and I know, and you all know, people with autism can succeed and thrive in any industry if given the proper support. We need to just look for those same characteristics that make someone such a great software tester out in Silicon Valley, and how does that translate to positions we have locally, right? So whether it's in manufacturing, agriculture, where are the positions that need those same skill sets? So here's what we'd like to really unveil and launch or describe for you that we will be launching over the next few months and building over the next 3 years as we're engaged in Iowa with a company called Lee Container. The Lee Container is a chemical agriculture company. They make the containers for Roundup, for Josh. I always get tripped up because I am a Long Island guy, and I'm ignorant.
You're doing great. You're
okay.
doing great. So
all the important stuff. Yeah.
So essentially, anything that a vessel can go in. They also do some food, oil things, those types of things. So essentially, a manufacturer of containers.
Thanks.
Great job, Dave. No worries.
Thanks, guys. So we are working with Lee Container, and I want you to know it's really the family foundation, the Laurel Lee, J. Donald Lee Foundation, Family Foundation Fund that is supporting what we'll be developing. So we'll be delivering consultation to Lee Container to help them build an autism-led, but not autism only, disability hiring initiative. They want to hire people with autism, other neuro disabilities, other disabilities, and then they want to help others across the state of Iowa do the same, and they want to help make America a more neurodiverse, more autism-friendly culture and workplace. So part of how we'll be doing this is, in addition to what we're delivering to Lee Container itself, they're paying for us to develop tools that will be accessible to any other company or to any other party across Iowa. So if you see, and we have kind of 3 different kind of pillars as Josh and I see it, kind of making up what we like to call a bit of an ecosystem where we have these interacting parts, and everyone needs some support here. So empowering people with autism will be first. Our first course will come out next month, and it's a digital training course on workplace navigation, really focused on self-advocacy, teaching those skills, because one piece I wanted to mention to you all, the work here that's being done in Iowa, creating these courses, the work creating the consultation that we're giving to Lee Container is all being led by not me and Josh personally, but by our boss who is on the spectrum and our autistic colleagues. So this work is all being led by people with autism, and I'm really proud of that, and I want you to know that. So it was really important to that team that we focus first on those self-advocacy skills, understanding what I need in order to bring my best self to work, and then understanding how I can most effectively communicate that to a boss, to HR, etc. We'll also have our autism response team, which is largely our kind of information and referral team we have across the country, answering emails and texts and calls in English and in Spanish. We want to build a little bit of a team off of this that can provide some kind of soft case management support. So like kind of the soft support that we know some people with autism really need, but it's difficult to get. So it's not on the job per se, but maybe they're living on their own for the first time, or they need help accessing mental health resources, or transportation is a barrier and they're about to get fired. Who can they call for help? We want to kind of be there to offer that soft support. For employers, we'll have digital training courses for hiring managers and HR professionals. How can we better recruit, train, and onboard? And then crucially, how can we retain this talent? And even better, how can we help them advance and develop careers? We're tired of, and we've been totally guilty of this, of being part of initiatives in the past where someone got placed in a job and we said, great, we were done, we've done it, let's move on. And we find out a few months later, the person has been terminated, or 5 years later, they're still in the same entry-level position. And we don't want to see that. We also will have a training for coworkers. How can I better support a neurodiverse coworker in natural ways, where I'm not going to HR every 5 minutes or submitting a ticket to say that I helped my colleague with something that he or she needed help with. Josh and I and our autistic colleagues help each other all the time, every day, in natural ways. And I think we can do a better job of giving coworkers ideas about how they can do this. There'll also be digital training for vocational rehabilitation counselors and job coaches and other service providers. That will be next on our suite of training. And the last course there is in the community side, but it's a virtual technical assistance course for high school transition programs, college programs, and university programs. The goal there is to tap into, in Iowa, successful programs that have been funneling and creating a pipeline to talent to fill labor needs, right? So in certain counties, it might be a certain type of certificate in welding or whatever it might be. We know that they're really successful in these initiatives, but that they don't always include so many students with disabilities, and certainly not autistic students. We want to help them adjust their curricula to become more autism friendly, and then give some scholarship money to students with autism to go through and see how we did. The last piece, there's so much on here, but the last piece I want to mention is digital pipeline to talent. So we are going to be contracting with a partner who has done this really well, building what's basically like a dating website that helps with matching algorithm and artificial intelligence, match job seekers with autism and other disabilities to the opportunities that businesses can post online. The nice thing about this system will be we can work with these companies, confirm they've gotten some sort of training, whether that's through our own training, it doesn't have to be, or someone else's. Once we've gotten that kind of confirmation, we can turn their switch on, and now they can recruit from our talent database in our pipeline. So we're really excited about this. This will come out in October or November and will be national, not just in Iowa. So we're really excited about that. I am going to move on to give you just a quick screenshot from that first course, the Navigating the Workplace course. So you see some of these different kind of scans that our autistic colleagues really wanted to build into this course for people with autism and other disabilities.
Hey, Dave, can I jump in just real quick before
please.
we? So the courses are made if you can take them individually as an autistic job seeker or somebody else with a neurodiversity, or we've also had individuals who need some guided support to go through. So it's not either or. The goal is to really develop it for the continuity of the spectrum. So.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Josh. So to illustrate what was described earlier, really, we want to be collaborative, and what we're trying to do here is listen as much as we can. And we're having lots of incredible phone calls with Amy and her group and so many others across Iowa. We're also, you may have seen, surveying both families with autism and now service providers, and hopefully you've seen those kind of been circulating. We want to listen. We want to not come into Iowa and say, we know best, we know better, but instead to say, where do you need help? Where are the gaps? How can Autism Speaks come and serve to fill some of those gaps? And we have partners. So we have friends in Best Buddies and Special Olympics. We partnered up together with the help of a group called Entertainment Industry Foundation to create this initiative called Delivering Jobs. This is more of like a PR campaign to get all of our corporate partners and others to commit to hiring people with not just autism, but all intellectual and developmental disabilities. You will see some PR stuff, some spots on TV and maybe radio about delivering jobs, but it may not come from us. It may come from Best Buddies or Special Olympics, and we wanted you to know it's all the same. I won't go into detail, but in case I know, we know this is top priority for so many of our families. We continue to build a pretty helpful page, I think, of COVID-19 resources across the lifespan. So for young children, for people trying to plan for education, which is absolutely impossible right now, to suggestions for employees with autism who are working from home for the first time. We have lots of good resources there, and I encourage you to check it out. And then here's that autism response team that Josh pointed out, that not everyone in Iowa is certainly aware of this. I just want to make sure that you are. It's a pretty great resource, staffed largely by parents, siblings, and professionals, clinicians. So they're here to answer questions and connect people to resources in English or in Spanish, on a chat, on email, on phone calls as well. Autism Cares grants are small grants, direct cash to people who are in real dire straits. And we've been able to help lots of families kind of get through a little bit of this crisis. It's not a tremendous amount of money, but it's been one of the most commonly requested resources for us during this time. And I encourage you to let people know about it. That's the Autism Cares grant there at the bottom. Amy, thank you so much. I hope I didn't take up too much time. I think that was about 20 minutes. Josh, last chance, did I miss anything big or anything you wanted to just kind of reinforce for this group?
No, I think you hit everything on the head, and Amy and Jess and some of the others, this is their multiple time hearing this, so we really do appreciate it. But we always ask, just kind of wrapping up, and you can either drop it in the chat or feel free to email Dave or I. But if there's anything that you think we can help with, we're not saying we can. However, if we can connect you with different resources, whether they're in a research area that you're interested in, or just you want to know what another state may be doing, please don't hesitate to let us know.
And Amy, I'm happy to share the slides if anyone would like to review them again. I know it's a lot to digest on probably one of 8 Zoom calls you have today. So
yeah,
happy to share those.
That would be fabulous. And we send the recording as well as any of the materials from today to our whole mailing list in case people couldn't join us. So it should reach a larger network as well. We have a few minutes if folks have any questions or comments. Feel free to unmute yourself or put things in the chat if you'd like to know more or share anything based on Autism Speaks work. That was a fabulous, very efficient overview, by the way, you guys. It was great.
Oh, good.
Amy, we're getting way better. I think we got like around like 1 or 2. So we're trying to get a little bit more efficient.
So does anybody have any comments or questions? I don't know if Dave's aware of this, not being in Iowa, but we had a hurricane recently in Iowa. And there are, excuse me, some communities that have been profoundly impacted. And so as you were just talking, Dave, about the grants that are available directly for families who are in dire need, I guess I just wanted to mention to folks, between the pandemic and then maybe areas that have been really devastated with the recent storm, that might just be a nice resource to be aware of, to be able to share with families who have a family member with autism who might really benefit from some additional resource. So
absolutely, Amy. That's before the pandemic. Typically, this would follow natural disasters, storms, tornadoes. Yeah, so that's exactly how it first was created. This fund.
Great, thank you.
Amy, if I can make one more pitch, if there's anyone who on the call did receive our providers survey, if you wouldn't mind taking it, that would be so very helpful for us. And we're going to share that back out. So it's not like we're going to get the information and just hold it. The goal is to kind of really have something kind of bundled up by the end of the year to share back out to Iowans who helped. So.
Excellent. And are you guys still collecting the information from parents and families, your first survey?
That one closed. Closed about a week and a half ago. Yeah.
Okay. So I just sent out to everybody through the coalition recently what the service provider and counselor source, I would call them maybe resources to individuals and families. And it's a second round of a needs assessment survey. I just sent that out, and please feel free to forward that to your networks and encourage folks to take it.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you guys
so much.
Really appreciate your time and all the great information.
Same.
Thank you for the work you're all doing.
Thanks. All right. I am going to turn this over. Do we have Julie on the line?
I'm here.
Looks like you might have more time, Brooke. Oh, there you are, Julie. Hi. It's good to see you. So the next part of our meeting, we're going to do some policy and advocacy, and we have our lovely Julie Christensen and lovely Brooke Lovelace to give us kind of a federal view and a state view, and there's a lot of stuff I think happening, and a lot of stuff happening between now and our next coalition meeting, which will follow an election. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Julie and Brooke. Thank you both so much.
All righty. I think I was nominated to go first. Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. It's a new headset, so I was a little nervous. So hi, Iowans. You have all been in my thoughts. The news, even here in DC, about what you guys have been struggling with derecho or whatever it was called. Horrible. So just wanted to let you all know that you are in our thoughts. Two quick logistics before I jump in to some updates. One is, because I cannot multitask, later on in my remarks I will be referencing a COVID survey that APSI did earlier in the year, and I put the link in the chat box because I won't remember to do it when I get to that point. So that's there for you. And I also want to give a shout out to two awesome ICIE members who are doing really cool things on a national level that I just want to make sure folks are aware of. Paige Easton, the fabulous Paige Easton, did a huge favor for me, and with like 3 days notice did an awesome overview of Iowa APSI's Day on the Hill for a panel of different approaches around the country to engaging in state advocacy. So super, super grateful to Paige and to APSI in Iowa and ICIE for all the work that you guys continue to do, as well as the amazing Bill Stump, who is actively engaged in a coalition of individuals with disabilities and family members who are working with the Biden campaign right now on what policy priorities need to be put in place heading into the election, and depending on what happens with the election heading into January. So just want to acknowledge that Iowa continues to be on the forefront of all things policy and disability employment, rightfully so, has been certainly the history and the legacy, and it's so super exciting for me to be able to continue to watch that and support it. So without further ado, I am tasked with giving a little bit of a federal policy update, and then Brooke is going to kind of bring it home in terms of Iowa. It's nice to see your face, Brooke, down in the bottom of my screen, and happy birthday. So I'm going to admit that I reached out to Kari earlier today because I was like, I am such Debbie Downer. I don't know what to say to ICIE because there is no good news. What should I do? And Kari, ever the amazing supportive co-member of staff and part of the team, was like, just tell the truth. So there you go. That's what you're going to get from me. So things are not great in the world of disability policy. So let me just kind of recap where we're at. First and foremost is that right now, the only thing moving at the federal level in relation to disability policy is in response to COVID. The last congressional relief package that was passed was back in March. You might remember this thing called the CARES Act. It was 5 months ago, which feels like 5 years ago. That was a pretty comprehensive bill that provided relief in a number of different capacities, but did not include, as we talked about at the last quarterly meeting, any targeted funding or relief for people with disabilities, for the service systems that support people with disabilities, and for the funding streams that fund those services and supports. So we have been actively engaged for many, many months. The House introduced the HEROES Act in May. We were somewhat, I will say, happy with the package in terms of our asks, but it still fell pretty short in terms of what we know is needed in the field and what we were hearing from all of you and from others around the country. But regardless, it was a start. The hope was that that package would be passed early in the summer and that we would have an opportunity to negotiate another stimulus package going into the fall. Obviously, that has not happened. The Senate has not yet responded to the HEROES Act, and all talks at this point are stalled. As of last week, the plan was to reconvene the Senate in September after the August recess. It would be a very tight window to put a package together because we are up against the election cycle, but also returning in September is appropriations time. And so passing a relief bill at the same time that we're looking at budgets for 2021 and beyond is certainly a daunting task. We are anticipating continuing resolutions from Congress for a number of reasons that are, I'm sure, obvious. But I do want to say that the election is playing a key part, both in appropriations, but also in COVID relief. One of the things that became really apparent as the Senate and House were trying to negotiate a package for is that there's very little will to entertain an extensive package in general, but no one wants to touch Medicaid or Social Security prior to the election. And a lot of the relief that we were looking at fell into those two categories, and that was making folks on both sides of the aisle relatively nervous. It is something that we're continuing to push for Iowa in particular. We know that money follows the person. The current Medicaid extender for that is set to expire on November 30th. So that's the timeline we're up against in terms of MFP. A lot of the other pieces of the CARES Act have now timed out. So the unemployment benefits, the PPP loans, and some of the other pieces and parts that were helping to sustain disability services did expire the end of July without renewal. So that's kind of where we're at, although because nothing happens in a silo, there is some scuttlebutt that both the House and the Senate will return occur early to address Postal Service funding leading up until the election. And so there is a very small possibility that there will be an opportunity to get some language into what will essentially be a stopgap bill if they choose to do that. It's unclear. Every day is a new story about that. But at this point, they are, the House is supposed to vote on Saturday, and the Senate is supposed to be coming back at some point next week around Postal Service. So we're continuing to look at what opportunities there are within that package. So all in all, I would say the outlook is bleak. I am sitting outside because I need sunlight to remind me that, you know, the sun does indeed rise, because it's depressing, I'm gonna tell you. You guys know, you're in the weeds of doing the actual work. I absolutely internalized the secondary trauma of feeling completely inadequate to convince anybody to do the right thing, to make sure that you all are getting the supports that you need to do the work that you do so well. But we continue to march on. So, package 4. The outlook is not great for all the reasons that I mentioned. Postal Service stopgap bill aside, the plan is for there to be some sort of a small bill released in September. With Congress not coming back till mid-September, we're not looking at that happening before the end of September at the earliest, which we all know is going to be too late. What we also know is that we likely have one shot. So Postal Service stopgap aside, it is unlikely that there will be more than the currently negotiated package prior to the election. We're just too close to that milestone for Congress to feel comfortable making any significant fiscal decisions. So next steps and timing. We are continuing to advocate really around 3 primary areas. The best shot we had on the Medicaid front was the ask for some dedicated funding for home and community-based services, and on APSE's end, we've been adding comma, including employment services, to make it clear that when we're talking about home and community-based services, we need some of that funding to filter down to LTSS employment. Full VR allocation is another critical ask. That should be a relatively easy ask because those are dollars that are already in the existing federal budget. It does not require more money, but it does require congressional approval and some other hoops to jump through to allow the full state allocation of federal dollars for VR to be made to the states with no contingencies for the states to have to meet the 15% match. That one we know is critical because state budgets, we're just starting to hear of some of the impact of COVID on state budgets, and we're hearing in many states across the board cuts to rates, both on the Medicaid and the vocational rehabilitation side. This should be a pretty easy lift just to convince the federal government to release the full amount and to waive that 15% match. I will say, in case you're really in the weeds of this, there is there's another ask that is floating to waive the 15% pre-ETS set aside. And APSE is not supporting that, and I will tell you why. We recognize that implementation of pre-ETS has been difficult. However, we know that many aspects of pre-ETS are able to be delivered virtually right now, and there are some great examples of where that's happening around the country that we're trying to raise awareness of. We also know that we're heading into a just bizarre 2020-2021 education year. And quite frankly, any dollars to support successful transition of youth to outcomes, to positive outcomes, we want to see that funding remain in place. We know that there's a lot of barriers to that, but are continuing to work on that. And we're also advocating around the extender of the payment protection program. More dollars available, greater eligibility, and longer timeframes. So those are the key messages right now. I mentioned the Kobit survey. I encourage you all to take a look at that. This was really a down and dirty opportunity to showcase to Congress the direct impact on disability employment outcomes and services and service providers. So we did a 2-week national survey. We got over 600 responses, and we found some really interesting stuff that, if I am successful at sharing my screen right now, I'm going to just very quickly run through. Can you see it? Can you see it? All right, thumbs up. So these are hard to see, but you can see them better in the link that I sent you. Words not working. Okay, so I'm just going to do this real quick. So we know in the beginning stages, so this data was collected in June. So this was, sort of the April-May impact of what was going on. We know this information is already out of date. But that being said, here's where we were at as of June. 67% decrease in VR referrals. 43% slowing of Medicaid reimbursements. A lot of this piece has been ironed out. A lot of this was just systems trying to figure out how to work remotely, and we know that that's challenging. But we wanted to dig a little bit deeper. So what the charts are showing is we did survey on furloughing of direct support professionals in the employment sector, specifically job coaches, job developers, and the like. And we asked a couple of questions around that. How many have been furloughed or laid off, and what is the likelihood of those positions being rehired based on the fiscal situation we were all in June. 22% at that point was the projected national loss in direct employment supports across the country based on where we were at in June. Some things have improved, others have not. We saw a lot of services closing, not surprising to see facility-based services closing because of COVID and the congregate settings concerns, but a lot of other services closing as well, pre-ETS programs, supported employment, customized employment, and so that's obviously very concerning. And then the only thing we really did get out of the Great CARES package back in March was the PPP loans. And we wanted to figure out how that was impacting us. And what we found out was that 50% of providers actually applied. Lots of reasons why they didn't, that we have given that feedback to Congress in terms of more funding, but of those who did apply, only 45% received a loan, which means overall 23% of disability employment service providers received help from the PPP program. So kind of goes to show a little bit of the scope of what we're up against. And then there's some bad news, good news. We did see some early job losses for people with disabilities. We expected that. At the time, those job losses were keeping pace with the general population. So we were not seeing in the early stages that people with disabilities were disproportionately losing their jobs. And when we looked at market sector, not surprising where the majority of those job losses initially happened, as businesses and communities shuttered, and people had to go home. Obviously, a lot of the retail, a lot of the service sector. But here's the more important news. Despite all of the stress on the system and the stress on the work that all of you guys do on a daily basis that I just described, people with disabilities were also getting jobs. They were filling essential worker jobs during the pandemic. And they were primarily doing it in manufacturing, in retail, particularly distribution centers, but also grocery stores, and the like, in healthcare settings, and in the general service population. So what we saw was an initial exodus, but then a very quick opportunity for people with disabilities to fill essential jobs. That comes with a lot of other stuff that we did not have good data on at the time in terms of the safety of workers in general, not just people with disabilities. But I think the good news is that I will go so far as to say, I get yelled at when I say this, but I think we have a pretty strong case to say that our economy during the crisis relied on people with disabilities. The types of jobs that were essential jobs were always disproportionately filled by people with disabilities to begin with, not to mention that people with disabilities were entering the workforce to fill essential jobs when as they were becoming available. And so that is good news and something we can build on. We've obviously seen a dramatic shift in the service system, service delivery approach. Everything is virtual now. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because you all know that. And I think that's really all I have to say about that. So just really a quick, I'm trying to figure out how to get back to the ICIE screen. I'm just going to stop sharing. That's what I need to do. Okay. So that is what we knew in June. It is now August. We know things in some ways might have improved, but in many ways things are even more challenging. So next week, please keep an eye out. We are doing a follow-up survey to get some current information. We'll be able to do sort of a compare and contrast of, sort of where we were at in June and where we're at in, August, September. This is really critical because in terms of timing, we will be putting together an executive summary before the end of September of what is happening within disability services to get that to congressional leaders as they're looking at the next COVID relief package. So keep an eye out for that link and help us get the word out. We want to get as many responses as we can across the country. Also tying into National Disability Employment Awareness Month, we will be doing a focus on telling stories of essential workers during the pandemic. And so we could use help from you amazing Iowans in helping to tell those stories as well, be that people with disabilities working in essential jobs, service providers supporting people to work in those jobs, or employers themselves who have retained or hired people with disabilities during the pandemic to fill these jobs. The idea is that a combination of targeted stories as well as some data on what is happening in the service system, that we can align this to go alongside the negotiations for the next COVID package, as well as leading into the election. So I think, we can't really, there's nothing I can say about what happens in December because we need to see what happens in November. But there's a lot of work that we can be doing to try to at least get, raise some awareness and do some education about what's happening and what the impact has been of the pandemic. And in Iowa, I know of the hurricane and many things going on. I'm going to stop babbling. Happy to answer questions, but I'm going to hand it over to Brooke.
Thank you, Julie. That was fabulous. Really appreciate it.
Amy, did you want to do questions for Julie first before I go on, or?
No, why don't you go ahead, Brooke, and we'll just open it up for questions, okay, if that's okay for both of you.
That works for me. Can everybody hear me? I'm sure we have been without internet for a while, but we did actually have it come back on Monday. And I don't know if I was just imagining this, but it seemed like it was faster than it ever had been before. And I've been able to work from home for the rest of the week until today, and it's been going in and out. So just figures, if I lose you, it's not on purpose. It's because my internet went down. But so I thought I would start in case you guys missed it. The legislative session did get back together and convene for a week and a half. And I thought I would highlight some of that stuff, if you could call it a highlight. It seems like that, even it was June, it seems like that is now forever ago. But just some things to talk about. The budget did pass pretty much status quo from what it was last year, with relatively few changes, and that was House File 2643, in case folks are interested in looking at it. And so that is good news. I know some of the others through the DD councils through the other states that the disability programs have been receiving significant cuts because of COVID. And so far, we haven't seen the impact of that. I do think if you guys follow like the revenue estimating conference folks, the ones that estimate the revenue coming in for Iowa, that they do paint kind of a grim picture for the 2022 budget. They're thinking because of the tax revenue coming in, because of the loss, or because of COVID-19, the loss of tax revenue could really hit the state. And so that we could see some changes for the 2022 budget. So it's something that we'll want to monitor. There were some changes on how the MHDS regions function, and we do have those changes highlighted in the last issue of Infonet that's on our website if you're curious about what those were. And that one came out like the first week of July, so do check that out if you haven't looked at that. The governor did, you may have recalled, the governor did propose having a 1 cent sales tax added increase. Was some of that funding going to the regions, and because of COVID, that was dropped. We do anticipate that will be part of the 2021 legislative session again, to get more funding to the regions. One of the things that came out kind of at the last hour was and this is still kind of going on today on a national level, so I'm sure everybody's heard about this, but there's so much controversy about the absentee ballots. As you guys recall, the Secretary of State, Paul Pate, did send out absentee ballot request forms to all registered voters for the primary. The DD Council and our project Iowa with Disabilities in Action really supported this, and we encouraged people to stay safe, vote from home, and did some marketing around that to make sure people realize that they could request their ballots if they haven't, and to vote from home. There was a record turnout for the primary this year. And I think it's primarily because of that push to have people stay at home and vote. For whatever reason, there were some state senators that were against this. And so there were some amendments that were basically, like I said, submitted at the last hour, and they were passed and then signed by the governor. A couple of these, it requires that the Legislative Council approves the Secretary of State office, needs to approve the Secretary of State's office if they're going to pass or exercise an emergency plan, which is what he did previously to be able to send out the absentee ballot. So if the Secretary of State wants to do that, he does have to get approval from the Legislative Council. It also allowed county auditors to reduce their polling sites by 35% during an emergency. And then the most controversial, I feel, for folks with disabilities is that it also bars county auditors from using their database to correct any information on a ballot request form that may be missing or may be ineligible, because they do have all that information for registered voters already in their database. So say, for example, somebody is just missing one number out of their zip code, or if their writing is unreadable, they're not able to fill in that information like they previously were to send out that to the absentee ballot. So now they have to either email or call that person within 24 hours. And if they don't get a response, then they have to send out a letter asking them to resend it or to gather that information. So it just puts a lot more unneeded time in the whole process. Folks only have 29 days now to vote by mail. And so this really could have an impact on folks with disabilities and older Iowans. We did actually write the governor prior to her signing this, asking her to veto this piece of it, but she ended up signing it into law. So just have your folks that when you work with be aware of that, and if you do support folks with disabilities, help them fill out those ballots if they're those request forms if they're having issues. The Legislative Council did go ahead anyway and approve the Secretary of State's emergency plan, and so absentee ballots were sent out to all registered voters. I think I got mine last week, and so for all of that. They ended up approving it anyway, but it's now into law that he has to go to the Secretary of State has to go to the council to approve that. So you should have received those absentee ballots last week. So don't throw them away. And they're request forms, so you still have to fill it out, send it in to get the actual ballot to vote. So those are just request forms that were sent out. So if you didn't get it, or if you're not registered to vote, the deadline to request a ballot is October 24th, and that's also the deadline to register to vote. But you can still register in person on Election Day, which is November 3rd. So October 5th through November 2nd is when the early voting in person at your county auditor's office can take place, or by mail. Absentee ballots must be postmarked by November 2nd. So sticking with the voter, that's something that our Disability Council, through our Islands of Disabilities in Action, we're big proponents of, getting people out to vote. So we do have a couple of things out there for folks that are interested. We do have a voter education grant that's up to $1,500 for organizations that are led by people with disabilities that want to increase their voter turnout in their communities. And so those applications are available right now on our website. So if you know of organizations that want to do that and are led by folks with disabilities, please have them apply for that. And then we also always have our voter trainings that we do around this time too, for organizations, agencies, providers that want to increase the voter turnout, and then educate their folks that they support on how to vote. So if you're interested in us coming out and doing that, please get in contact with me or Bill, our new policy public manager, to get that scheduled for you. We have a few scheduled, and so I think it's almost September already. Those will start, his calendar will start filling up for that. So do get those requests in. There were a couple of other bills I just want to point out that do show that folks' advocacy work does work. The advocacy actually can be successful. I don't know if you guys saw, but House File 2372 was passed, and this was efforts by a strong advocate folks may know of, Tyler Leach. This actually was in the paper. It allows folks that have a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder that they can request. It's not a requirement, but they can request a designation on their driver's license to say that they do have autism in case they are pulled over and stopped, and the police officer may assume, based on the nervousness or whatever, that the person could be intoxicated and not responding well to the officer. And so it's just made basically a safety feature for folks that want that designation, so the officer does know that there may be communication issues or whatever. So that did get passed and signed, and it really was Tyler Leach reaching out to, I think it was Tony, I always pronounce his name wrong, Bisiango, that he worked with to get that added to the driver's license. And so it was his own advocacy that he did on his own. There was also one that we talked about at previous ICIE meetings that made it so hospitals or healthcare providers couldn't discriminate against a person with disability who needed an organ transplant. And that did pass. That's House File 2561, and the governor did sign that into law. And that was also by a mom, a family advocate, who worked with her legislator to get that bill. I can't even believe it was even on the books in the first place, that folks couldn't discriminate against somebody if they had a disability and needed an organ transplant. So again, when you do visit with your legislators and talk to them one-on-one, it does have an impact and an effect. So even though there's a lot of bad news out there, it does still work to visit with your legislators. So continue to do that. Only 7% of the bills introduced were signed into law this session, which I suppose isn't no surprise because it was a shortened session. I think we usually think it's about 15%. But there are still some that you may need more information on. And so as I said, our last issue of InfoNet does highlight all of the bills that were signed into law. So do check that out on our website. We do also have a special edition of InfoNet that's going to be coming out either, what's today, tomorrow, Friday, or early next week. It's going to have some information. We have Disability Rights Iowa is writing a guest article for us on sharing some tips for parents and students about what to do if their IEP is not being implemented during this time of a pandemic. And so we're really grateful for him to do that. And so do check that out. Hopefully it will be electronic tomorrow. And we are gonna send that out hard copy to everybody too, because we know that there's still a lot of areas that don't have internet. So, you know, no surprise, I'm sure that everybody knows the election is coming up, and we do have all of our state representatives are running for election. If there's somebody running against them this November, and then half of our senators. So we could have a whole totally new makeup of how our legislature looks next year. And we will have a special, I shouldn't call it special, I think we do this every time, but we will have an issue of Infonet coming closer to the election that will share some information about candidates and about voting. So do check that out. I do want to thank, I know I see some of the folks that are on here today also participated in the listening sessions that the Economic Recovery Advisory Board had. The Duty Council was able to participate in the Healthcare and Public Health Work Group that is part of the Governor's Economic Recovery Advisory Board. Basically, the advisory board is supposed to put in some recommendations for changes to the governor on, you know, what to do in the situation if this arises again, and how can we fix the healthcare system and the economy to be stronger to face the epidemic. Hopefully not epidemic again, but at least I think we've all seen that there's there were lots of gaps, and I think the pandemic just made it more people more aware that there's things that definitely need to be fixed. And so that's what this work group is supposed to be doing. And I know some folks did participate in that, and I appreciate that. I think, just to let you know, and I'll share this with Amy to send out, I think there'll be more, once those priorities or recommendations are developed, I think there'll be more time for input for people on that. So I'll send that out when I have that information for Amy. Just a couple of council, if I have a few more minutes of time. Amy, I'm looking at you. Okay. Just a couple things for the council. It's still not too late to register for Make Your Mark conference, our self-advocacy conference. It's going virtual. I'm sure that's also not a surprise, but you can still register for that. And some of our folks, Tammy and Sue Ann and Bill and Kyle are part of our keynote speakers. And so thank you guys for doing that. We do have Kayla Mckenna coming, who is our first keynote speaker, which I want to say it's the first day in September. It's the first Tuesday in September. All of these are held over the lunch hour. Kayla is a lobbyist for the National Down Syndrome Society, who also happens to have Down syndrome herself. And so she's our first keynote speaker. So do register and hear her and all of our other great keynote speakers. And please encourage your folks your folks you support to get registered for it. We do also have technology grants available for people that may need help supporting their folks get hooked up to a laptop or getting a hotspot or something so they can participate. So, and I think the application or I think that expires tomorrow. So if folks need those technology grants, do apply for those. I think it's just a simple application. One more thing that we're doing is that folks, I think, do know Lisa Heddens, who is a former representative, and now she's currently a Story County supervisor. She's going to be leading a discussion for us on social isolation as from a perspective of a family member of an adult child. Since the pandemic, she hasn't been able to spend time with her son, and that can have an impact on the whole family situation. And so she's going to talk about how she's been trying to cope with that. And it's more of like just a conversation, not that she's got the solutions to everything, but just to open up the dialogue for other family members that want to talk about how they've been coping and how they get around some things. That is going to be on December, good Lord. I don't want it to be December yet. I still want it to be summer, September 2nd. So that invite for that should go out this week still. So be on the lookout for that. Two more things. We do have an open spot on our council for either a family member or a person with a disability. So if you are somebody that knows somebody that would like to be part of our council, please encourage them to apply. It's at Talent Bank Iowa now that they apply, and they can always contact me, and I can get them on the right path to apply. We also, lastly, are looking As you may know, last year we did a Take Your Legislator to Work campaign for part of the National Disability Employment Awareness Month. This year, and plus it's also an election year, and you have to do things virtually now. We weren't really quite sure how to do that, and so what we're planning on doing is videotaping 4 to 5 folks while they're at work, explaining what they do, and then inviting legislators to like a legislative breakfast to watch that and kind of have a discussion about employment. And then we've also been in contact with the governor's office on having her be involved with that too. And they're very interested in that. And so if you know of somebody that would like to be videotaped while they're at work and have their supervisor also maybe say a few words and then participate in a discussion later during the month of October, do have them shoot me an email or give me a call. I think, let me look at my list of stuff. I think that's all I have. I probably went over time. I did, sorry.
No, don't worry about it, Brooke. That was fabulous. Really great information. I just want to open it up for a few minutes in case folks have any questions or comments for Brooke or for Julie. You can put them in the chat box, or you can also just unmute yourself. One of the things that we talked about a bit in our core team with Brooke was just the real importance and what all the efforts that the DD Council invests in trying to make sure that people have good information to be able to engage in the election. And Brooke, as she talked about today and kind of put it in front of us at a core team meeting too, is it's not just what's happening at the federal level, it's also what's happening at the state level. And I think there's so much going on right now, it's easy to kind of forget about some of that and get distracted. But if there's things we can do to help support getting people information or hosting, events or I guess just anything as far as related to trying to support people's engagement in the election process at both the state and the federal level, and anything we can do between now and the election, we would be happy to do to try to support that. And I appreciate everything that the council's doing as well in trying to help people get engaged and share, share what they want and need right now. Julie said in the chat, state level advocacy is critical right now. I hate to say it, but Congress is a mess. Thank you, Julie.
That's a nonpartisan statement.
Right.
They're
right.
all a mess.
It's a good time for us to make sure that we're sharing our opinions and engaging in our right to vote. So, all right, thank you both so much. That was fabulous information. I look forward to it every time because I walk away with so much more, feeling so much more confident that I have some good federal and state information. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Vienna to give us an IVRS update and benefits planning. Susie might get engaged in this as well. So it's all yours, Vienna.
I'm sorry I had to join late. I had another meeting that I would had to be in before this. VR, we are just gearing up to with a lot of our contracts and so forth. Just working on getting those things done with our OWEP contracts as well as our intermediary networks and so forth. And so we're just kind of excited to wrap that down and as well as get the new plans started for this next fiscal year, where things are going to be quite different because a lot of things are going to, we're in the midst of trying to figure out how to make everything virtual. We're seeing that at least through the end of this calendar year, VR has decided to remain virtual as much as possible. with options, of course, for situations where in-person and face-to-face is needed. We're able to continue to provide all of the various platforms that people need to meet us in. So with that being said, you know, the collaborations that we have with the schools and so forth, we're trying to be mindful of their need to kind of adjust things as well. And so with all of our collaborative programs with the schools, we're kind of waiting to see how that goes for them, at least for the next 2-3 weeks here when school starts. And so we probably don't foresee really getting active until sometime in September with that front. And then with our benefit, well, actually, I'll let Susie talk about some of the things, the neat initiatives that we have going on with benefits planning and so forth. Susie, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, thanks, Vienna. I'm Susie Paulson. I work for Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation. I'm a resource manager, and I focus on benefits counseling across the state. We have about 30 trained benefits planners. 8 of them are actually certified through VCU, which is quite an accomplishment in the last year and a half. But I wanted to talk a little bit about an initiative that we started just in April. As a parent, I realize it's difficult sometimes to go to transition nights to get the information that you need. A lot of times providers, not providers, but a lot of times professionals will tell you, just go there, do this, but they don't really explain exactly what the ins and outs are of it. So when we decided to do this parent gathering, and we did it every other week till about the beginning of July. And basically we did a group for parents of deaf and hard of hearing and their students, and then also for other transitioning age students. And the first one, we talked about Social Security, SSI, and the student earned income exclusion. And with the we had over 60 people that showed up for the transitioning youth, and about 9 families that showed up for the deaf and hard of hearing, and their students showed up too. It's been kind of cool that first initial one really was to, let's talk about it. What information do you need? And then I sent out a survey. Everybody gave me their email addresses, and we actually asked what topics, really hit home for you. What things do you need to understand about Social Security and some of the other things that happen as the individuals start to transition into adulthood. And so the top 2 were, how do I apply for SSI, of course, and the second one was guardianship. So we were fortunate to be able to get Jennifer Donovan from the Iowa Department on Aging, the Office of Guardianship and Substitute Decision Making. And actually the parents needed more information and they wanted to do it twice. So we actually combined the groups, and she spoke 2 times to the individuals. We also had a presentation from the Iowa ABLE, the state savings program, and that was really well attended too. So we've kind of done a break now. The interesting thing when I did this survey was that the parents, I know this, you guys all know this to be true, but the parents were like, I don't even know what questions to ask. I don't even know where to start. And so that's been pretty enlightening. So one of the things we also did was we had Mary Jackson talk about the transition services that are available through vocational rehabilitation. Every time we got close to 60 people that showed up, and we've collected all the emails. I think I have over 120 emails with both groups, and it just keeps growing. And I hope that you will send that out to your networks for people to join us. I try to make sure that we're talking about the things that the parents really want to hear about. And so the next ones are going to start in September. We're using the second Tuesday of every month between 6 and 7 p.m. So it's kind of after hours. But one of the things parents said too was, I would love to go to transition nights, but I have a child or a student that it just doesn't make sense. I mean, if you have a child with special needs, sometimes their routine at night takes hours and you don't really have anybody to leave them with. And so it seemed really important to do this virtually. I think it really hit home for a lot of parents. So in September, we're going to talk about SSI, the basics. We've already done one on the applying for SSI, but I'm sure that one's going to get repeated again. Then we've developed one that is reporting wages to Social Security, which right now is incredibly tricky. I help people understand that there's several different ways to report your wages. I'm telling people, do not send your paycheck stubs into Social Security offices. Several of the offices have told me that there's a stack sitting there and it's been there for 6 months and nobody's touching it. Actually, they admitted it's been there for over a year. So what I'm telling parents is do it online, and I give them practical ways to do it. And then there's a Ssi Wage Reporting App that they can also do it. So that'll be a really good one, information that people can really use. In November, we're going to talk about SSI and 1619B, which some of you know is continued Medicaid, because I think that is like huge for individuals. It just literally frees the parents when they go, oh, they can keep the Medicaid even if the SSI goes to zero. They're still connected to SSI. So that's huge. And Iowa's Medicaid threshold this year was $34,000, over $34,000. That's huge. So then the December one will be focused on the Social Security reviews that are happening. We're kind of keeping a folder of all the different letters people get. So when they tell us they got this letter, we can find it and we can explain it to them, because their letters are very anxiety producing, at least for me. So our stat guy looked at the benefits counseling that we've provided, people that have gone off benefits in the last year, 97 individuals that saved the state $900,000. I thought that was pretty powerful. I have a great group. Like I said, it's 30 people. We meet every week. They're all over the state. I can put the link to the Zoom meetings. People have to register, or you can just send me an email, but I can put that in there if you have families that are interested in the gatherings, that would be great.
Susie, if you send that to us, we'll make sure it's in the notes as well.
Okay.
For people to share. Thank you.
Hey, Susie, what's the name of the app, the SSI Wage Reporting App? What's that called?
That's exactly what it's called, SSI
Awesome.
Wage Reporting App. I could show you a picture of it if you want me to share my screen.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. I think the other, yeah, I think the other thing that's really interesting is that Social Security, all of you need to make sure that you have an SSA, an account on socialsecurity.gov. That is really going to be huge for all of us in the future. But I would go in now and I would check and make sure that you that your wages are accurately recorded, because when you get closer to retirement, that's going to be huge. But what I discovered one week, which was sort of cool, because I'm always checking mine, and I noticed that on my account, Lucy's name, I have a daughter with significant disability and I'm her payee, and her name was listed under mine. So I could actually go in there and I can report her wages that way. So I really encourage parents to do that. They have to call the Social Security office first in order to tell them who the employer is. But then it should come up in their account. So I just got to find my pictures here, and that's not the right one. Okay. Okay, there you go. SSI Wage Reporting App. And of course it's free, so. Can you guys all see that?
Awesome, yes, that's great.
Okay. Yeah, and actually I was showing that to students and they seriously get on it and do it in 5 minutes less. It's very, very simple. But for parents, the information is really it's life-changing, I think. I've set up a Google Drive with all the resources that we've collected. Plus I have different documents for each one of the topics so that they can go in anytime and put questions in, and then I either answer them or I get other professionals. Jennifer Donovan has been awesome that way, coming in and answering questions for us. As you know, because a lot of things changed with guardianship this year. And a lot of people looked at, 19 pages of the guardianship report, and they were super overwhelmed before they even actually looked at it. And I know when I did ours, I thought, oh, this isn't that hard. I mean, it's very simple. But then, like 4 months later, you get a letter saying, hey, you didn't do the care plan. Who was supposed to tell me these things, So it's been really good. And the parents have been great getting back to me on their experiences as they're going into, and talking, well, not going into, but they're talking to Social Security and the reactions that they get. So I think all those things, those experiences that people have is really helpful for us to say, hey, well, word it this way, don't word it that way. So that's kind of where we're at.
Susie, thank you so much for that update. As you guys can see, we at VR, we are so lucky, and I love that we have Susie on our team. And so there's lots more that I'm in the process of planning to figure a way to tap into that brain of hers. She is such a wealth of information, and not only that, she's so passionate and so helpful. But one of the other things that Amy and I are going to be doing as part of the ICIE work is to include benefits planning, Susie's involvement and their team's involvement in terms of how we work with sub-minimum wage folks to make sure that they're getting the information that they need to make informed choice about employment and so forth. And so that's another initiative that's going to be going up there along with some other things that we're going to be working with through ICIE. The IPS, I think it's been about, a little over a month that we've incorporated the changes in how we do IPS. I got an update from our teams across the state, and there hasn't been any referral, and I think that has probably been a lot to do with the situation that we're in, of course, but we also have some cases that have been going on from the previous year as well, and I think that we actually seen some closures, some successful closures through this period, despite of things. And so even though we didn't get any referrals, we worked on the ones that we had, and I feel like in just the last couple months or so we've had 6 successful closures. So that's quite a bit when you consider the environment that's going on with employers and so forth, as well as some of the fears that a lot of our folks had to work with the people to overcome and so forth. So we've been working with a lot of our CRPs and the HMOs also. I've been going in collaboration with our local offices, working with Denise Jules at AmeriGroup to do a presentation to kind of braid all of our services together and improve communication and collaboration among the CRPs, HMOs, and VR, so that our constituents experience a more seamless process in terms of making sure that they're getting the support and employment services needs that they are needing. So that's been going great. I've got a lot of awesome feedback in terms of just understanding the documentations that are needed with the support employment services from both IME as well as VR. And it can get really confusing for a CRP to know, what are all the documentations that's needed. Yeah, we've entered into these agreements to provide support and employment services, but there are things that go along with it in order to make sure that they're doing it right, and not only doing it right, but also doing it in a way that it'll meet the job candidate's needs. And so it's been interesting in terms of really seeing how the communication has actually improved. And across the state, I've seen both from our CRPs as well as from our local offices, saying how, you know, they really see the need for the communication and the collaboration, because it not only it helps them in doing, you know, crossing the I's and the T's and stuff like that for the bureaucratic work, but it also fosters movement towards progression in the case. And so that communication, that collaboration really taps into everybody's strengths and resources that they know about, and people are sharing it and so forth. And so that has been, that was the big goal, and I think from what I'm seeing, it's succeeding. And so we still have quite a few offices to do our presentation with. I don't know if Denise is on the line here, but I'm getting a lot of good feedback about having her present with me and just talking about how we are working together. Another great thing that has resulted from these training that Denise and I have been doing is that we're getting folks who have made agreements to meet on a regular basis, whether it be weekly or monthly and so forth. So that there in and of itself has been awesome to see our offices do. So that's pretty much it for VR.
Thank you so much, Vienna and Susie. That's great, great information. And I'm excited to get folks connected to what you're doing with both the benefits planning and the parent-family support, as well as we will continue to provide information about some of the things that are going on with the subminimum wage supports for subminimum wage earners and all the work that a whole lot of folks are investing in right now related to IPS. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over. Our next update is from the Department of Education with Nancy and Kirsten, and taking a look at Return to Learn.
Woohoo! Everybody's favorite topic. So in lieu of the opening sharing that Amy typically does, Nancy and I just put together a few things that we've missed during this whole COVID-19 thing. So that could have been a share that could have gone across the whole crowd, but the Sci-Hawk game, Ragbri, the Field of Dreams game, and then just a little tidbit that I learned putting this together, the fair, of course, but I thought the butter cow was unique to Iowa. Did you know that many other states have butter cows too? Because I was just going to put up the butter cow, right? But it's not unique to Iowa. So anyway, we're going to share, and we just linked. So all of these letters and words and numbers in front of you are links. And Nancy's going to start out and just share some new initiatives within the Department of Education, and then I'll share a few things as well. But all of these are linked so that when Jess and Amy share out the things that were presented here today, these are all hot links, and you'll be able to access the resources that we're going to talk about directly. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy.
Okay, thank you, Kirsten. So the first resource that we actually wanted to start with is our new special early intervention and special education guidance system. And it's called the Iowa IDEA Information, or I3. And so this site has been under development for a while, and it was created in collaboration between the Department of Education and area education agencies across Iowa. And it really is meant to be a one-stop shop for procedures and resources around the IEP and the IFSP. So one of the things that it did replace is the IEP Documentation Guide, which is a procedures manual that the AEAs use. And this manual was over 200 pages long. And one of the advantages of this site, besides nobody likes going through a manual of 200 pages, is this site is a lot easier to navigate, a lot friendlier. It also allows us to add information for families and displayed in a way that is easy to kind of digest. And also the previous procedures manual was only updated once a year, as it was a PDF that was on a website. So this new site allows anytime there's changes, it can be immediately updated. So it's a lot more timely and a lot more up to date. This is just the first phase of the special education guidance system. So you'll see up here in the upper right-hand corner, there's also a link to the IEP IFSP web system, and that's our current system. However, there's a new system under development, and it will be called Achieve. That should be launched during the 21-22 school year is the goal, and so this will also be integrated. The new Achieve system will be integrated into the site. So this is really meant to be a one-stop shop where all of kind of our Iowa special education information around guidance, resources, and procedures will live. So just, we don't have a lot of time, so I just wanted to kind of give you a quick idea of what's here. So you'll see here at the top, there's menus that provide additional information. So you can find information about earlier intervention. You can also find special education information, and you'll see the different categories that you can find related to each topic. One other really incredible sort of feature of the site that of course did not happen in a PDF is that this can also be easily translated to other languages. So if you see at the bottom that we can change this at any time to any language, and it will automatically change on the screen. So it makes it a lot more accessible in that way as well. Under the resource section, you'll find that there is information through different topics, and these little icons at the top allow you to filter. So if you're just interested in secondary transition, for example, you can click on that and then see all the information that might be for educators, for parents and families, and any guidance that the department might have issued as well. And the same thing for early access. So you see that the little icons change based on which one you click on. The site updates section will give you information on what's new in the site and what's been released, because things will be added throughout time. And under here, under the categories, you'll see there's some tutorial videos as well. So here you can find information about how to use the site, including bookmarking. So if this is a site that you would use often and you want to bookmark some specific pages, there's a quick little video, tutorial video that lets you know how to do that. And then the search function is probably one of the other great features because it allows you to search for specific information. For example, the information page, and this is where, I'm sorry, my cat is insisting on trying to come onto my desk with me. So the this information page is a PDF. So this is not able to be translated, but otherwise you can see everything else is translated if it's a web page. So this gives you information about the I page, which is where schools will be documenting any changes that they need to make due to the change in location. If a student is working in a remote learning environment or in a hybrid environment. So anything that needs to be documented here would be on the I page. Kirsten, if there's anything you want to add about that, please feel free.
Nope, I'm glad you pointed that out because I think the I page is important right now in this return to learn environment.
And so this particular document that I clicked on actually takes you to the questions down at the bottom, the prompts that a IEP team would be thinking about when considering what kinds of changes might need to be made for the virtual or hybrid learning.
And the only thing I'll add to that is that every student with an IEP, their IEP teams are meeting, and obviously they can't convene and change every IEP in the state prior to the start of school, but it is a focus and I think priority really looking at kids with the most needs, making sure that we've been able to identify those. So if you are working with a student and that hasn't happened yet, know that that is going to happen soon.
Thank you for adding that. So any questions briefly about that site? You can certainly, I put the link in the chat, so you can certainly look at it on your own as well and navigate around. You obviously can't break it, so feel free to click around wherever you want.
You know, the one other thing, like you, Nancy, you just pointed out the link. One thing I really love about this is that it is the same information everywhere. It's public access. Anybody can reach it. If you know, whether you're a family member, a student, a community provider, VR, whatever. It's not that there's a procedures manual in the AEA, you know, archives that educators can access. It's open documents, so everybody's getting the same information, and I think that's a really cool part of this.
And there was, and I'm if I failed to mention this, I apologize, but it was also, in addition to it being a collaborative effort between DE and AEA, it also, we received much input from parents and from partner agencies across Iowa. So there was a great job done to try to gather as much feedback as possible while creating the site. And if there's things that you would like to see, there's a contact form where you can send in feedback as well. So if there's information that you feel is missing on the site that would be useful, then that can also be sent in. Okay, I'll move on quickly to our COVID-19 guidance and information page. And this is a web page that is on our public-facing website, the Department of Education's public-facing site, and you can link to this page from the home page. You can easily see where to link to it from. This page is extremely overwhelming. The department has been releasing documents and having webinars on at least at the minimum a weekly basis since March. So there is a lot of documents on this page. As you can probably tell if you can see my scroll bar here to the right. So I just wanted to show you that on this page, the very first section is really bookmarks to different pieces of the web page. So you can find what you're looking for here if you use this first part for bookmarks. So for example, if you're looking for special education and you click on that, it will take you to all of the guidance documents and the FAQs and resource documents that have been released since March. And then it will also give you a quick little blurb on what you can expect from that document. In addition, there are links to different other agencies and their guidance, other state agencies like Public Health and Human Services. And you'll find probably what you've heard a lot about is Return to Learn. And so I'm going to click on the Return to Learn section because here's where you will see, again, a lot of information. One thing to note is that some of these resources, if it's in guidance, then it's more required. For example, this Return to Learn guidance. I just want to click on it to show you what it looks like. So you'll see that this has this heading, Iowa Department of Education Guidance. So this is going to be, this one, particular one is talking about how schools were required to submit their Return to Learn plans by July 1st. In addition, there is also a lot of information that is just meant to provide some support or resources as schools think about returning to learn. So this first link here under Return to Learn is a Google site. So I'm going to click on that to show you. Again, super overwhelming. This is not necessarily required information. This is a lot of support documents that a school can use. And there's also information categorized here for leadership, health and safety, and social, emotional, behavioral health, and then special education as well. So if I click on that, you'll see there's a list of resources. Probably the easiest is to go to this Return to Learn compendium of resources, because this is organized, again, in phases. So it's looking at reentry, also looking at resources around receiving FAPE, and so on. So there is a lot of information there. I clearly don't have time to go through it all, but I wanted to show you how it's organized and give you kind of an overview of what's out there. All of the webinars that were provided to the field are also linked from the department's page that I showed you. So if you're interested in any of the webinars, you're free to watch those as well, because they've all been published on YouTube or uploaded to YouTube.
Can I jump in real quick, Nancy?
Yes, I was
Maybe
gonna.
you were going to say this, but
Yeah.
she's talking about the webinars. You know, most of the webinars are guidance and support documents and procedures and pretty dry kind of stuff, but really valuable information as you're preparing to return to learn. On the 18th, just earlier this week, there was a webinar about about brains and isolation and returning to learn, and what the isolation has done not only to kids' brains but adult brains, and how connecting with people helps you to get those feel good, the dopamine and the oxytocin and all of those feel good kinds of dope, she calls them, back into our brains, and how important that is. But it was very science-based, but she had good information about, you know, just what good teaching looks like, but also about what good learning, teaching and learning in a remote or virtual kind of setting might look like. And so if that's something you'd be interested in, it's there in those recordings that Nancy referred. Oh, and there it is. She pulled it
Yeah,
up.
I was gonna say, can you see my screen? So this is a link of all the recordings, and some of them are real heavy on school finance, not probably going to be digestible or interesting to somebody who's not in school finance, for example. But the one that Kirsten was talking about was very interesting, based on brain science and talking about engagement and so on. So this list gives you kind of a brief sentence about what the webinar is about. So if you're interested in seeing any of those, you can. But as you can see, they've been at least weekly since March. So that gives you just an idea of where you can look for information that you might need. And Kirsten, do you want to go ahead and start talking a little bit more about the secondary transition piece? And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Sure. Okay, so I'm just going to share more resources. You can find them the same place where Nancy was around secondary transition. But the thing I wanted to point out in particular, there are a lot of documents that are set up the same way, where we talk about in that first column, what's the model, what's the strategy, what are the effective practices that are used in behavior and social emotional learning in a variety of different areas. This one is secondary transition. So what are the effective practices in column 1? What does that look like when you're in a traditional setting? So in a typical classroom kind of setting. And then we move to how might that look different in a virtual setting? And then the fourth column provides an overview of some resources so that you could use in a virtual setting. Oops, there we go. So for example, this one about transition inventories and surveys provides some interest inventories, some questions for families, a career quiz that you can do online, or a picture career interest inventory. So those kinds of resources. When you go through this document, the model is right up here that's followed. And I'm just going to share this really quickly because this is a model that was created and introduced and used pretty regularly back when Barb Guy was in the transition lead position within the state of Iowa. When she went to the special ed director position, her position was kind of unfilled for a while, and it's been just kind of lost over the years. So I worked with a team of people to put together the Return to Learn guidance, and as we were trying to determine how to put it together, we decided to pull back this model. And I wanted to just point this out to you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. We are going to have a webinar probably late in September to really walk through and spend more time on the model as well as the Return to Learn document. But I just wanted to point this out to you because I think we get stuck sometimes in special education as to, what the process to follow around effective transition. And this model is the process. You start with those post-secondary expectations and where do we want that student to be, and then design your assessment and your instruction and your services and supports around getting the student to their post-secondary expectations. And this provides a lot of tips and resources and connections for the IEP team to use. So hopefully that's something that folks will find useful.
Kirsten, really,
yep.
Can I say something very quickly? That, as you mentioned, the team, just one thing that I wanted to make clear too is that none of these resources were developed just by the Department of Education, for example, or Kirsten didn't develop these on her own, but all of them were developed with teams that included districts and AEAs, Department of Public Health when necessary, Governor's Office, etc.
Yep, good point. Thank you, Nancy. I also wanted to share the Transition Iowa website. This too has been around for a while, but our lovely Mari Reynolds, who I think is on this call, she was earlier anyway, is really leading the work around reorganizing, rejuvenating, restructuring, and promoting the Transition Iowa website. And Mari, is there anything you would want to say in particular about this? I mean, I can share a few things, but you're the expert.
We had some focus groups and some surveys that went out and really got some input from lots of different places on what people are looking for. And so, yeah, we're going to have quite a few new changes and some new features that'll be coming soon. So just excited to, make it more of what people need. And so, one of the things that we're going to also include is a place to submit if you have resources that you'd like to share that you want to make sure are included there. And I know that you guys, you're the folks that know what people need and how to connect to the different resources. So I'd love to hear any input on what you guys would like to see as well.
Mari has done an incredible job of really detailing a process that's very individually community driven, really community driven, and really engaging folks, family members, individuals, community providers, educators in getting feedback and input as to the changes that are needed, and then created a detailed plan of how that's going to be implemented. There is a place under the contact site here, though, if you have feedback. So if you're on the website and you're having trouble finding something, or you're on the website and you think something doesn't look right, or the information doesn't seem accurate, or whatever, any kind of input, there's a place right here to submit that, and that will get to Mari, and she'll have a team of folks working with her ongoing to keep everything current and accurate, but you as the user can contribute at any time to that. Anything else you would add, Mari?
I don't think so. We're just really looking forward to making it what everybody wants it to be. And so I appreciate all the input we can get around that.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Then the last thing I want to share is just the Iowa Secondary Transition Learning Community. And I think all of you have seen this. We talked about it last year, but this is just a place where we're collecting. This will be linked on the Transition Iowa website, but where we're collecting the webinars that were held last year are all here, and we'll start collecting as we start doing webinars and compiling an ongoing list here. We also have information from the fall gathering last year, which we were hoping to have a fall gathering this year and aren't going to be able to, but I'm still hopeful for a spring gathering. There's also some guardianship and conservatorship information here. And then something that's new that we shared last year, but just want to point out again, is the Secondary Transition 101 tab. We had a small cohort where we worked with some folks who are new to the field of transition from AEAs across the state and put together just some really basic introductory best practices information around secondary transition. And then we wanted to share that information, so those are all here and can be accessed by anyone at any time. And I think that is all I have to share.
Thank you so much, Kirsten and Nancy. I'm a little afraid we're starting to kind of run out of some time. We still have our beautiful Leanne Moskowitz. Good thing IME stuff isn't complicated. Leanne, can I turn it over to you? And I just want to make a couple of quick comments. We might run over slightly on time, so please feel free to hang in there, or we will have the recording and notes that we'll share. So sorry about that. It's really hard to get everything we really want to get in 2 hours. We couldn't do it in 5 before. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to you, Leanne. Thank you so much.
All right, yeah, I got a hard stop at noon too. So I just wanted to let you all know that, of course, you know, life is never dull at Medicaid, and we've been dealing with the derecho that happened last week. I swear that's a made up word. Anyway, I have provided you all in the chat box a couple of helpful links. Again, there's resources out there for the derecho. If you know anyone who's on food assistance and had to throw out their food last week because of the storm and losing power, etc., they are able to apply to replace those things. And so if they go out and replace the food, if you go out and visit that derecho resources, that's available now. Folks can submit an application to get monies to replace that food. Also, I provided you the link to the COVID-19 resource webpage. We're constantly updating that as we get new guidance. We've been getting a lot of questions about can Medicaid services assist kids with virtual and online and distance learning. We're still trying to figure that out because, of course, you know, ultimately it is the school's responsibility to provide for the education and any assistance that's identified in the IEP. So we're still trying to tweeze that out. We do have a couple meetings next week to try and address it, but of course kids are going back to school next week. We've got, you know, the federal regulations don't allow for waiver services to help with education, but we may need to consider asking CMS for a waiver so that we can provide some of that assistance through waiver services. And so we're still trying to figure that out, and we have some calls and meetings early next week to try and address that. So stay tuned. Probably the biggest thing that came out recently was we sent out an informational letter about grants that are available to Hcbs providers. You probably heard in the governor's news conference that $30 million have been allocated for Hcbs providers to apply for. That informational letter was sent out last week. And so providers just need to click on that link in that informational letter if they believe that they qualify. So to qualify, they need to have had claims paid during state fiscal 19 for an Hcbs waiver or an Hcbs habilitation service and submit their application. There is a threshold for payment. So providers had to have a certain amount of claims paid during state fiscal 19 in order to be eligible for the grant disbursement. It's a specific amount based on the algorithm of apportioning that money out to all of the Hcbs eligible providers. So I just encourage providers who haven't applied to do so. I believe they have until September to apply. But you know, sooner rather than later. We've already gotten over 100 requests this week between the mental health, behavioral health, and the HCBS providers. So, and of course, if it appears that someone isn't eligible, that gets kicked over to policy to go out and investigate. So we want to make sure that if you're not eligible, you're not eligible. But if you are eligible, we want to make sure you get what's coming. So anyway, IPS, continue to work with Lynn and the group on trying to bring IPS forward. I'm sure Lynn has shared the training announcement. There's going to be a series, and maybe Lynn will talk a little bit about that. There's a training series that's coming out, 5-part webinar series about IPS. And so we're excited. We really are looking forward to trying figuring out how to make this work in Iowa, figuring out how to pay for a trainer, pay for consultants, activities, also the fidelity reviews, all of that stuff, in addition to just paying for the service. So we're going to keep moving along with that. I presented on the dehabilitation rules on Tuesday during the community of practice. Those are sitting with the governor's office. As soon as they get done reviewing them and decide they're okay to move forward, then they'll go over to the Administrative Rules Committee and start the process. So they kind of got put on hold for quite a while. We're hoping they get going, and we're still hoping to target a January 1st date for the improvement in those rehabilitation services and building that pathway to employment. So it's been busy, never a dull moment. But you know, we're always here to assist folks and try to get questions answered and do what we can for people. So hopefully in the next week or two, we'll be putting out some more guidance about kids and returning to you know, learn and what, if anything, we can do to provide assistance in the home environment for those kids that are doing distance learning. We know some kids are you know, if you live in Des Moines or, you know, Polk County, we're looking at all online learning to begin, you know, and some school districts are doing, you know, 2 or 3 days a week. I mean, it's all over the place. So we just need to kind of figure out what, if anything, we can do from a Medicaid perspective, since, you know, traditionally we can only pay for those things that are in the state plan. And that are identified in somebody's IEP. So, and that of course excludes waiver services. And again, we do have the opportunity to ask CMS for flexibilities. We are reviewing the flexibilities that we've asked for and been granted through CMS to determine if any of those things need to be continued beyond COVID, like services that are being rendered via telehealth that typically require face-to-face in-person contact. The additional services of meals, homemaker, and senior companion that we expanded to the other waiver programs, things like that. So we're going to be doing a lot of work on that in the next couple weeks, and seeing what we need to do to continue some of those things, and then what we need to do to reel some of those things back once the public health emergency is over. So continuous eligibility is ongoing right now. Currently, we are extending eligibility out to the end of October. So no one will lose eligibility if they otherwise wouldn't be eligible for Medicaid or for the HCBS waivers. Kiddos aging out of CMH waiver, you know, should be transitioning to adult services, but we are keeping the CMH waiver program request open even beyond the 18th birthday right now, because again, continuous eligibility until the public health emergency is over. And then of course we will be notifying members of when we're going to reel back that flexibility, and that the MOE, or the maintenance of effort for continuous eligibility, is coming to an end. So questions?
Yeah, Bill was asking if there are any guidelines to how the grant money has to be spent. Yeah.
Yes, that's all in the informational letter. So, and I had it brought up, but I'm thinking I closed it. Let me see here. So the grant dollars have to be used by 2020 or through the 2021 year. I got 3 screens open here and I don't know where my mouse is. There it is. The CARES Act, this requires that the payments from the relief fund are used to cover the necessary expenditures incurred due to the health emergency with respect to COVID. They're incurred during the period of March 1st, 2020 till December 30th, 2020, and expenses haven't been reimbursed from some other source. So again, it's used to defray the costs that providers are incurring for PPE, staff overtime, all that. So again, if they don't expend all the funds for the intended purposes, the remaining funds will be returned to DHS by January 3rd, 2021. So yeah, there are guidelines in that informational letter. It's informational letter 2149.
Leanne, or
Yep.
people, this is Kayla. I will link the IL in the minutes so people can just click on it and have access to it.
Great, thank you. There's also a link in that informational letter about the coronavirus relief fund. And I know Julie had talked about the number of people who had applied for and got relief funds. And there are a lot of providers out there who may be eligible for additional assistance. So if providers haven't applied, I highly urge you to go out and apply. And they have provided additional guidance that is applicable to our community providers. So there's money out there. Go get it if you can. So, any other questions for me? I got to get off.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you so much.
Yep.
We will link as well the community of practice information, because we did record the recent community of practice call this week with Leanne and Lynn Niblink, which has a lot of great information both about the IPS work as well as the DAHAB rules and the changes within that. So if folks weren't able to access that or aren't on that community of practice email list, we'll include that. We'll also include the information about the IPS. I think just put it in the box. There's a Google Doc that lays out the dates for the IPS webinars, and the registration links are in there. If you have any questions, let us know. Please feel free to share that with others. Just a couple of quick reminders to folks. Our next coalition meeting is November 19th. My guess is we will continue to do Zoom for a bit. So it's 10 to noon. And if there's specific pressing things that you would like us to put on our agenda, please let us know. We're also, because we're trying to get so much information in a short amount of time with our coalition meetings right now, we're going to try to also offer some additional sort of supplemental sessions in between our coalition meetings, and we're going to kick that off in September with an assistive technology webinar that VR is going to partner with us to offer and provide. We're really wanting, because of the need right now, and I think as we move forward beyond the pandemic, how to utilize technology to really support the work that we're trying to do right now. And so that we'll do that on September 15th. Again, we'll record it and make it available, and it will be 1 to 2 o'clock, and we'll send out some information on that. We're also looking for possibility topics that you're interested in, that you would really like us to help identify speakers and have targeted presentations for the Employment First community of practice for the next year. We're in the process of planning that, as well as our supplemental webinars. So please send us any ideas or suggestions or wants that would meet your needs right now. We want to make sure that they're as current and as appropriate to what's going on in your lives right now and your work right now. So share those ideas with us as well. Other than that, oh, Gay, you were going to mention the email, I think, too, for folks to share if you're
Amy, you have frozen.
not on our mailing list. Okay.
Oh, could you say that again? You totally broke up for me.
Oh, you bet. We sometimes have people who participate, but they're not on our email list. So if you haven't been getting ICIE emails, but you want to be added to the list, please just reach out and let us know, and we'll make sure that we've included that. And for those of you who work with others that you think might want to be part of that list, let us know and we can add them or share with them the emails that we go out, because we think that sometimes we only have 1 or 2 people represented where there might be others within your organizations or agencies that might be interested or see benefit in certain topics. So any other announcements that folks have? All right. I don't see anything. Oh, thank you, Kyra. Thank you everybody so much for your time. Thank you for all your really good work. Please stay healthy and well, and I look forward to seeing you again, hopefully very soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.